Good afternoon. I'm George Latimer, Westchester County Executive, and we're here in the city of New Rochelle. Mayor Noam Bramson is joining us today, and we have a large group of individuals that are all involved in a very innovative program that we want to present to you on this, the first day of October, October being the start of Domestic Violence Awareness Month. This month-long observation is not really one of those symbolic things that we do for a host of different areas. This is an opportunity to show that there's no place for domestic violence in Westchester County and in any of the municipalities of our county, and we want to cover today a program that is ongoing, that is a partnership between the county government and the municipal governments to try to put the right educational tools in the hands of local police and various other officials that we think will help us in dealing with those cases of domestic violence where the individual might be subject to serious violent action, and we want to try to eliminate or reduce any likelihood of that. I have with me a number of people, all of whom are going to speak in a few minutes. We're going to hear from Frederick Green, who is a second deputy district attorney. We have with us Robbie Schlaff, who's director of the Office for Women, Nancy Tunis, who's program coordinator for the Domestic Violence High Risk Training Program, what we're talking about here today, Commissioner Robert Gazzola of the New Rochelle Police Department, Cindy Canisher, who's the executive director of the Pace Women's Justice Center, and we also want to hear from the mayor of the city of New Rochelle, the Honorable Noam Bramson. So with that, to sort of outline the program, we'll go through this piece by piece so you get an idea of what this initiative is. I'm going to ask my friend Nancy Tunis, who's program coordinator, Domestic Violence High Risk Training Program, to give us the outline of what the program is. Nancy.
Thank you, George. Do you want to go first?
Be my guest.
Okay. I'd like to thank George for always being on the cutting edge of every program and bringing them to Westchester County, enabling us to serve our residents to the best possible way. And I would also like to thank my team, and besides everybody here, we trained in New Rochelle for 4.5 months, starting in the winter, ending in June. Eddie Hayes and his team were absolutely phenomenal. Yadi Machada is one of the best DV officers that we have. But we had a special training. We have a big team. Cindy Canisher's on it, Carla Horton. We have a high-risk team. But I have a training team that I just want to give a shout-out to. We have Glenna Lunn of the county police trains, and the rest are not able to, and Frederick Green trains. We also have Lisha Sandberg of the medical center, without whom this whole program would have fallen apart. We have Chief Dave Ryan, Chief of Pound Ridge, Chief Joe Castelli of White Plains, Chief Emeritus Ann Fitzsimmons from White Plains, and a wonderful, wonderful survivor who has not missed one training. We have managed to train 20 departments despite COVID. We have had 210 calls into the medical center based on our program. Our program is teaching police departments how to do trauma-informed, victim-sensitive interviewing. And when they go to a high-risk domestic violence, intimate partner case only, they ask 12 questions that have been researched and approved and done up by Jackie Campbell. And if the victim answers yes in a certain percentage, they immediately call an advocate. We have Yocasta Alvarez here, who is a wonderful advocate, Paula, her supervisor, at the medical center, who will do on-site safety planning with the victim, get permission for her name to be sent to a DVSP agency, and a safe phone number, a safe callback number, a safe text number, and the agency, mainly Carla Horton of Hope Store and VAS, and I'm not sure why they're not here, and they will call the victim, and they will take the victim under their arm and embrace them and give them advocacy, and then refer them off into PACE for legal services so they don't have to go into court for an order of protection, and they have a place to go. Our next training, which is killing me, is Yonkers. We are training for 2.5 months, 5 days a week, 8 times a day. So we're all going to be very exhausted, but we're very excited. But New Rochelle was our first big city, and we appreciate it, and we loved every minute of being here. It was joyful. And now, Robbie?
Thank you. So I think Nancy went through the program, and if you have questions after, we can definitely answer that. And as my boss, the county executive, said, this is first day of October, Domestic Violence Awareness Month. And sadly, domestic violence incidences are not going down. We find, we were just talking about this, since COVID, the cases are getting more violent. Maybe people are waiting longer to call. And as Nancy said, Yadi Machado, who is the DV detective here, connects with our office so we can do the safety planning while she works with Fred Green at the DA's office to prosecute the cases. So New Rochelle has a police department and a mayor. That's like our county exec and our county police department that are open to new ways and to collaborating to try to reduce the incidence of domestic violence. But what we have found that in addition to helping victims and strengthening prosecutions, the connections between law enforcement, the domestic violence service providers, and the community have been strengthened through this initiative. And those are relationships that will last and that help everyone in Westchester County. So I want to thank you to my boss, the county exec, for your support, for your compassion, and for your continued commitment to improving the lives of victims and their families. And Nancy, we couldn't have done this without you.
Thank you, Robbie. What you're seeing with each of the different speakers is the nature of the partnership that is required in order for us to cover the ground that has to be done and to provide a service that gets a positive end result. It requires those who are trained and those who are available to deal with the individuals, the victims, and also to be able to put them in a situation where they have confidence and comfort in the people that they're dealing with. But we also have to deal with the legal community. We have to deal as well with the law enforcement community and make all of those pieces mesh. So next I'm going to ask Frederick Green, who's the second Deputy District Attorney, to talk a little bit about how that element is critical. That area of professionalism is critical in making this training actually get real-world results. Frederick.
Okay, thank you. All right, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, County Executive Latimer. And I have to pass on greetings to all of you from District Attorney Mimi Roca, who I'm here to represent today, and really all the professionals that work in special victims in the District Attorney's office. I'm so honored to be part of this program today to talk about this team that I'm so committed to and that I really love working with, because this is a action-oriented team that is actually making a difference and getting things done. When I speak in my part of the training to police officers about what we expect them and hope that they'll do when they interact with crime survivors, I frequently tell the officers that we hope that they'll fulfill their core functions of collecting information, building strong cases, all to make victims safe. So I'd really just want to take 1 minute to tell you about the 3 core functions of this amazing team, which are really making a difference in Westchester. First, this high-risk team in Westchester literally springs into action when we learn about a case where someone is at high risk of danger in a domestic violence scenario. And to see these professionals that I get to work with every day come together and exchange their ideas is really a thing of wonder. These are folks who are at the top of their fields. These are the experts in the community, each from their respective field, whether it's law enforcement or advocacy. And we have a secret asset, a secret treasure, which is a crime survivor who makes such a difference. But when that team springs into action, it is action-oriented, and the steps that we come up with and that we take to make victims safe is really making a difference in the lives of people in Westchester County. So it's such an honor to be a part of that. The second function and core reason that team exists and why we're really here celebrating today is our training function. And Nancy has led us through various police departments to train them. And look, today is not only the beginning of Domestic Violence Awareness Month, it is the anniversary of my start as an assistant district attorney, because a few years ago, I won't say how many, but a few years ago on October 1st, I started my career as a prosecutor. And this work we're doing now as this training team and this high-risk response team is not the response of past years in how to make victims safe and how to build strong cases with accountability in the justice system. So just that we're here now is an incredible credit to forward-thinking law enforcement leaders like Commissioner Gazzola and his staff here in New Rochelle, who have welcomed us in for all those months into this department. It's like the county police and their leader. It's like my boss who supports this program, Chief Ryan, who's an integral part of this process, and all the other folks in law enforcement who believe in us taking a new approach, a trauma-informed and trauma-centered, victim-centered approach to making victims safe. It's an essential part of the training function. And Nancy, we're a little afraid of Yonkers because of how many there are, but we want to tackle it. And I think you know the enthusiasm that the team is bringing to that task ahead. And finally, the last function of the team really speaks to the county executive's I think his leadership and the mission that we're all here to do. And that is for all of us to be ambassadors and emissaries when we go into our communities, into our respective fields. I mean, we're all doing this high-risk work, but we all also have other responsibilities. You know, I'm a prosecutor. I still have to go to court, and Carla is running Hope's Store, and Robbie is running the Office for Women. We're still committed to this, so we go back to our fields as ambassadors of this new forward-thinking approach, this trauma-centered, trauma-informed approach to trying to stop this terrible problem of domestic violence that we have in our world and in our county. We have thousands of cases of domestic violence that we prosecute in Westchester every year, and we want to stop that. So it's another wonderful benefit of this team is to have such great partners who are collaborating with us all to spread the word, or as I guess is the message of October, to shine the light on domestic violence and try to put a stop to it. So I want to thank the county executive for getting us together here today, and the commissioner of the New Rochelle Police to getting us here together. I'm happy to be a part of this team and be here today with you all, and really honored to be part of any work that goes on to try to stop domestic violence.
Yes, sir. I appreciate it. Thank you very much. That's Frederick Green, the second Deputy District Attorney, and do convey to District Attorney Mimi Roca our respect for her work. Earlier this week, we were together for an announcement of her initiative called the Fresh Start Program, for which the county is a partner, amongst other partners, with the district attorney. So we've talked about the training function and the prosecutorial function. The men and women of law enforcement are the critical element in all of this. They are the ones that are on the firing lines, and let's be honest, we ask the men and women of law enforcement, our police officers and superior officers, to put themselves in the middle of situations that can range from very benign to extremely agitated, violent circumstances. And we ask them to do things that we, the rest of us as civilians, wouldn't do or couldn't do. And so we have great respect, and I've had the good fortune representing parts of New Rochelle for almost 20 years in other positions to know just how well trained already the men and women of the New Rochelle Police Department are, and how well they function out on the streets. Keep in mind, New Rochelle is the second largest city in this county, and the latest census put it in the 80,000 range of population. So it is a large city, one of the top 5-7 cities in New York State. So the leader of that department, commissioner appointed by the mayor, is Robert Gazzola, and we want him to talk a little bit about how this program interacts with the men and women of the police department from the professional standpoint of law enforcement. Commissioner.
So good afternoon. I am Rob Gazzola, Police Commissioner here in New Rochelle. I'm joined today with Lieutenant Edward Hayes. He's the department's training director, and he was a key component to getting the training here into New Rochelle. Also with Detective Yadi Machado, who is our Community Resources Officer, and our Lethality Assessment Program representative. And I agree with Nancy, she is one of the best DV officers in the county, so thank you for your work. And Ed is definitely one of the best training coordinators in the county. So like many police departments, New Rochelle responds to hundreds of domestic incidents per year. Not all of those incidents involve violence, but the potential violence or future violence is always possible. During our annual in-service training this year, we sought to provide our officers with a new tool to address domestic violence, and it placed an emphasis on preventing future or potential lethal consequences. To that end, we hosted a 4-hour training session with the domestic violence high-risk training team personnel, which included Dave Ryan, the Chief of Pound Ridge, and Chief Joe Castelli from White Plains. It included the assistance of a domestic violence victim who came in and spoke to our officers. The training was a 4-hour block of instruction presented over 15 weeks during COVID, during the winter months, and it included lieutenants, sergeants, detectives, and police officers. Once the training was concluded, we amended the manual procedures to include the assessment forms associated with the program. So far, year to date, we've had over 100 lethal assessment forms forwarded to our domestic violence officer. I think 8 of those were actually forwarded for victim assistance, which means that essentially there's at least 8 victims that we had that had potential issues that may have been resolved by using this program. So it's important, when you talk about, training programs, a lot of times it's just sort of theoretical, but we put it to use, and those are true victims. These are people that this program helped. So it's very important to understand that and to appreciate it, and so we thank you for all your help here. Thank you.
Now, we often talk about the role that different elements of government play in these circumstances. We all learn in school about an executive branch of government, a legislative branch of government, judicial branch of government. Somewhere in there is a prosecutorial function, which is really separate from judicial and it's separate from executive. And of course, we refer to the members of the press as the fourth estate, as having a separate role to play in this democracy. And as I've observed, there's really a fifth player in the game, and that is those organizations and individuals who are advocates, who advance ideas. They serve as agent provocateurs to help move policy in certain directions. You have advocates all along the spectrum of ideology. But in an area like this, the role that a not-for-profit organization plays is very pivotal, because they provide certain services, and they also provide an understanding of what government needs to focus on in order to have the positive result. We mentioned before, Carla Horton is with us here from Hope's Door. We know that we have in the area of domestic violence. My sister's place is a major player in the county. And we also benefit greatly by the professional work done by Pace Women's Justice Center. And this is an outgrowth of Pace University's commitment to law and the law school that they have, and to try to help train the next group of young lawyers to come into this particular area of public policy and help women on a range of issues, and perhaps no issue more important than that of domestic violence. So Cindy Canisher is with us here. She's the executive director of the Justice Center of Pace Women's Law Program. She's a member of our advisory board that the county has, and when she's around the table, many of these other folks are as well, so that we can talk about these public policy areas. And her role in all of this has also been very pivotal. So Cindy, we'd love for you to share your thoughts.
Thank you, County Executive Latimer. I'm Cindy Canisher, the Executive Director of the Pace Women's Justice Center. We're a legal services provider that provides services for victims of domestic violence, sexual assault, and elder abuse in Westchester County. And we serve over 3,000 clients a year. We are thrilled to be a member of the DVHRT training team and also part of the lethality assessment program in the county. Working with victims of abuse on a daily basis for over 30 years. So yes, Fred, I'll say the number. I've been doing this for probably over 30 years, but at the center we've been doing it for 30 years. We know the vital role that police play in the response to domestic violence in our communities. As first responders, it's often how the police interact with a victim that will make a difference whether that victim will continue on with the case, go forward in the criminal or civil justice system, or whether they will feel comfortable reaching out for help and connecting with a community resource like the Pace Women's Justice Center or Hope Store to provide safety and legal services. The DVHRT training provides police with the ability to identify a high-risk and potentially lethal situation and allows them to connect a victim with necessary emergency crisis support services like shelter, counseling, and advocacy or emergency legal help. We don't have to think too far to think of a situation where this type of training would have been useful. Perhaps when we think about the Gabby Petito case, I don't know what the police talked to her about or what questions they asked, but what I do know is that because of the training that the New Rochelle Police Department has received as part of the DVHRT training and as part of the LAP program, we know the questions that they would have asked. And perhaps having asked those questions and understood what was going on in the situation, the outcome for Gabby Petito may have been different. This increased collaboration and communication between the local domestic violence agencies, like the Pace Women's Justice Center, Hope Store, the DA's office, and the police, will keep victims of domestic violence and their children safe and supported in the community. I want to commend the New Rochelle Police Department for making the commitment to instituting this program and training their entire department on lethality assessment protocols. New Rochelle is lucky to have a police department and a mayor who clearly takes domestic violence seriously and are interested in saving lives. All of us also living in Westchester are truly fortunate to have a county executive like George Latimer, who continues to focus on services for domestic violence victims through its support of the Office for Women, like Nancy and Robbie, who have spearheaded this program and make sure that it happens, and for making sure that other necessary safety net resources are available for victims of domestic violence in our county, and doing everything he can to make sure that they're safe. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Cindy. Finally, I'd like to invite our host, the mayor of the city of New Rochelle, to share some of his thoughts. Over the last few years, during my tenure as county executive, the mayor and I, Noam Branson and I, have been involved in a host of different issues that could charitably be called urgent issues that approached us without much advance notice. Certainly the COVID outbreak is one of the most notable ones, but on a given morning, we find out that Con Edison has a breach in one of their lines, and pollutants are going out in the harbor, and the city and the county have to somehow coordinate to deal with it. We have hurricanes and high floods that come through, and I think the plague of locusts is probably due next week. But the reality is, throughout all of this, and he and I have had a working relationship during our prior assignments, that we've had different responsibilities, I as a legislator representing this area, and I've always been impressed by the fact that he's cool under pressure. He has a solid understanding of what the city government can do and how the other levels of government can interact, and when there's an opportunity to do something dynamic, he is at the ready to try to put the city on the side of that effort and that reform. So my friend, the mayor of the city of New Rochelle, the Honorable Noam Branson.
Thank you very much, George. We are certainly due for a month of boredom after the couple of years that we faced, but it is certainly true that the time to build trust is before the crisis hits. And the relationships that you build in those times really pay off when you need them most. I also have to say I'm particularly pleased that you assigned me credit for the appointment of Commissioner Gazzola. I'm happy to steal that credit from the city manager. Because, as indeed, we are very proud of Rob, just as we are proud of Yadi and Eddie and the entire NRPD for the great work that they do every day. The prior speakers have testified eloquently to the importance and the details of this initiative, so I will simply close by saluting the spirit of collaboration that's brought us all together. Every one of the institutions that's represented here is strengthened and put in a better position to deliver safety and justice to all the people we represent when we learn from each other. And I am entirely confident that as a result of this collaboration, the NRPD will be able to save lives and make it clear to our residents, our neighbors who are facing the most difficult crisis situations, that they are valued and loved and protected. Thank you.
So just to close off our comments before we take comments from the press, I've told the anecdote previously about how 40-some-odd years ago when I was a teenager, I was studying a test and I was whining that I had to be tested every week on a particular subject. And my father, of blessed memory, who was a very blunt, blue-collar fellow, came in and saw his teenage or preteen son complaining about being tested every week. And he looked at me sternly and he says, when you're a man, you're going to be tested every day. And he meant it, and he said it with a great force of power. I've never forgotten those words. And I think we all understand that the world outside these doors is a tough world. It puts pressure on us, and and there are dangers of all sort that we have to deal with. And as adults, we have to protect the children in our lives, the senior citizen in our lives that we come to care for. But if it is true that the outside world is dangerous, we all view our home life, the home that we go to at the end of the night, however grand or however small, as an area of refuge. And that the relationships that we have, whatever they are, that those are the intrinsic blocks that protect us from the cruelty of the outside world. How much more difficult is it when the potential threat isn't on the outside, but it's on the inside? How much more difficult is it when the threat isn't from somebody who is a stranger, but from somebody that you otherwise love, and that you have close connective relationships with? You have a family with that person. It creates a fear and a doubt that's far greater than the fear you have if you're in a strange place with unknown situations around you, because you feel at home, and the fear is where you are at home. Domestic violence is something that we read about if it doesn't affect us in a direct way. But for those people that it affects directly, it is an all-encompassing reality. It permeates everything that you do if that is what you face every day. So our obligation as a government, our obligation as people, is to try to figure out how can we lessen, to the extent that anyone from outside that moment can lessen it. Certainly there are laws, there are enforcement of those laws that come from law enforcement officers, and how well they do that job of enforcement, as difficult a job as it is, comes down to how well we give them resources. And resources do not always mean just money for equipment, but the training resources, the resources to help a person have the wisdom of Solomon and the patience of Job when they're dealing with a very difficult situation that none of us are really prepared to deal with. That is what we send our police officers in to deal with in these situations. And this program is a reality check that says we have to provide that assistance. We have to, and it takes time, as Nancy pointed out. These things do not happen in a minute. The fact that the New Rochelle Police Department has allocated this much time and energy and effort, and that the Yonkers Police Department is preparing to do the same thing, and we have, as you heard, chiefs from White Plains and Pound Ridge that are involved in this. We hope that we can make this program reach every corner of the county, because domestic violence knows no demographic. It is not something that some people, because of their age or their gender, race, ethnicity, are protected from. This can happen in the wealthiest of homes and in the poorest of homes. It can happen in this part of the county or that part of the county. So we have an obligation to try. That's what I think this program does. The county is happy to put our resources behind it, and even more than the financial resources which are there, the talent and the resources of the people that you've heard speak here today, and as I've said, the advocates as well, because they play a critical role in this, along with the professionals. So with that, we're happy to answer any questions from the press. You may direct them to any of the people who are here. Most likely, if you ask a technical question, I'm going to ask one of the folks to come up and try to answer it, but we'll ask our friends in the press for any questions they have. Jonathan Gordon from News 12. Any of our training professionals want to take a crack at that? Okay, please.
I'll just make one comment and then I'll let Robbie.
No, go ahead.
They did the best they could, but it was very obvious from looking at her. She was a nervous wreck. He was calm and cool and suave and had a story ready. That's very typical from what many of our officers see. The woman looks, or the victim looks just nuts. If they had asked her the 12 questions, slowly removing her from his view, I think they would have seen she was at high risk. And I think then they wouldn't have just separated them and sent them on their way. I could be wrong, we all could be wrong, but it appears that she was a victim and had been a victim. They focused on his injuries. She had injuries on her neck. They never looked at it because she said, oh, I made him angry. Well, why did you make him angry? Why did someone see you be slapped? They were kind, but they were uneducated.
So I think, and Carla, it would be great if you talk too. So I think this really goes to the heart of this whole program. There was a case in Pound Ridge. Stephen Dim killed his wife, his daughter, with a shotgun before turning the gun on himself. And we got together and we said, we have to do something. What are we missing here? And we realized that, and this was with a big group of people, the Commissioner of Mental Health, police chiefs, these folks, everybody was in a meeting together, and we said, what are we missing here? And what we were missing was an objective standard for everyone to use when they respond to an incident to try to assess the level of risk. Because in that case, the chief will tell you that the wife had come in 6 months before and had said, my husband was acting erratic. What does that mean? You know, what questions do you ask? Are you afraid? Has he hit you? Maybe none of those things. But with this risk assessment, this LAP, it's a standard number of questions, and it's really interesting because it's not necessarily what you would think the questions would be. Number one predictor, threats of suicide, Westchester County. Every single homicide had a threatened or completed homicide, except for one case, and all the homicides that were related to domestic violence where children were killed. That's one of the questions that's on this lethality assessment. So in terms of the Petito case, the cops didn't have this training. They didn't know the questions to ask, but this is a questionnaire that's been around since 25 years, and you know, we look at ourselves as a model. We talk about this all the time, a model for the state and a model for the country. Do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I would add that referencing the legal assessment tools that we have goes back to national studies that were conducted by Dr. Jacqueline Campbell, PhD at Johns Hopkins. And at Hope's Door, we started assessing every one of the victims we serve with a legal, a lethality assessment tool. And some of them are kind of intuitive. Has he threatened you? Does he have a gun? But for many people, they're shocked to hear that leaving him is one of the highest ranked risk factors. A gun gets you 5 points on a weighted scale, but leaving him gives you 4. Another risk factor in that home with an abused woman, and I'm talking, this is validated, by the way, only for abused women, is presence of children that are not the abusers. So the things that you need to learn are, some of them are like, well, duh, that kind of makes sense, and others are a huge surprise. But back to what the cops saw when they interviewed Gabby Petito. I'm reminded of the case of Amy Friedlander, whose husband went off to court. There was a divorce. He's going back to court. And when all is said and done, he beats her to death and takes a shotgun to little Molly and little Gregory. This is up in Cross River. And when I spoke about that case with people afterwards, and none of us worked with her, right? Never came through any of our doors or hotlines. I heard things like, well, from his law school buddy, well, if he had just killed her, I would have understood it. I would have baked him a cake with a file in it. Members of her gym said, well, she was really quite a bitch. And after that was said to me, and I'm doing a presentation with people who invited me in, I said, well, just how distraught do you think a woman would be living with a man who ultimately took a chair to her and a shotgun to its, 7 and 9, 8 and 10-year-old children. This does not bring out the best in anybody. And that's what people really need to understand. I am the child of a brutally battered woman. And every single person who ever met my dad would tell you what a great guy. He was the best looking, the best dressed, the best dancer. He couldn't do enough for you. The last time I saw him alive, it took 4 Chicago police officers, thank you, to carry him out of the house while he screamed of what he was going to do when he got back. You have no idea what brutalized mothers and their children experience, because that abuser's whole plan, the whole manipulation, is to convince you that she's the crazy one. And you can really make someone a little crazy. Have them doubt themselves. Have them make excuses. Have them defend. Have them minimize and deny themselves. So it's incumbent upon those of us who have the loving commitment, the organizational and legal support, the cops who are there on the scene first in the most dangerous, right? The most dangerous situations they face. We need to work together, and I commend all of the partners here who make that happen.
With that final note, we'll be happy to take other questions separately, but we thank you for being with us today. Let me thank again all of our guests who are here today, all of those who've been so deeply involved in all of this. We appreciate your following this story, and as we go further with this program, we'll keep you posted on its progress and results. I'm George Latimer, Westchester County Executive. Thank you. Have a good day.